They'd be like, oh, okay. And I was like, dude, really? I remember like my cousins be like, yeah, man, like I gave you money for like maybe good grades. I'd be like, you didn't tell me anything. I was like, I gave you my report card. And just, oh, okay. And then that was it. I was like, as a matter of fact, the first time I walked over was like a C or a D. They were like, oh, that's okay. That cost us like a card anyways. I was like, well, the thing is, I was like ABC all the way up to like 6th grade, and then 7th grade hit, and that's when I started kind of like looking back at it. I was in Arkansas, so I was got hit. I missed that in my class, so I kind of just moped around for a while, and my grades like dropped drastically. And so instead of any kind of correction, they just like, that's okay. And I was like, okay, then I guess.
Thinking as a kid, and then when I got older, I stopped doing it. I got positive. Like when I was a kid, hey, I get paid, and
he would tell us to close our eyes and his face.
so much money.
And he would tell us to breathe.
So I was like, I'm not too okay. I didn't get named, but it was like,
Have you tried honey?
Like I see my little friends on my teenage like they run away out there. But I didn't know
Okay, 30 more seconds.
I don't know, maybe if I did really something really bad, I can't think of anything really bad. I think by the time it's fourth or something, like really, I knew what to do and not to do.
And sometimes it would be
All right. So we're going to start a new series. It's called Enemies of the Heart. We're going to talk about guilt, anger, greed, and jealousy. How to define them, and how to actually cure some of these enemies of the heart as well. Today's more of the introduction. How's your heart? Life can be hard on the heart. The world is full of outside influences that have the power to disrupt the rhythm of your heart. And most are subtle. Over time, you develop habits that slowly erode your heart's sensitivity. The inevitable pain and disappointment of life have caused you to set up walls around your heart. Much of this is understandable. In short, your heart gets out of sync with the rhythm it was created to maintain. So I'm sure all of you guys remember your first very, very big disappointment or your big heartbreak or something didn't live up to its expectation or someone promised you something and it didn't become fulfilled. But you remember the pain, and so what happens the next time? You lessen your expectation. You doubt. And so what happens? Your heart gets hardened and hardened and hardened. You expect less and less and less. And so less and less and less you go far away from like examining your heart or how your heart is actually supposed to feel when there is disappointment. Okay? Dan?
Those things that disrupt the rhythms of the invisible heart linger. If left alone, some will linger for a lifetime. After a while, we come to accept these disruptors as part of us, part of our personality, and so we catch ourselves saying, that's just the way I am. But you weren't always that way. So let me ask you, how are things with your heart?
All right. So again, these things, it can change us. All right. So the question that we're going to be asking a lot, hopefully throughout this whole series, is how's your heart? How's your heart? What's the condition of your heart? What's going on inside your heart? Because a lot of times we don't get to actually examine them. We actually we're going to see Like we don't, if we think of it like a disease, we never see the disease. We only see like the symptoms of the disease. But we never really point it back to the heart a lot of times. We just go, oh, I just need to do this, or I just need to do this. But we never get to the heart of the matter. So for some of you guys, some of these things that we're going to talk about, it might bring up some bad memories, but hopefully it'll be good as well. Ricardo?
Chances are you've never stopped to consider your heart. And why should you? There are meals to fix, calls to return, interviews to prepare for, and bills to pay. If at the end of the day someone asks, how are things? You can smile and sigh and say, fine. But this is a different question. It's more important.
Okay, next.
Perhaps the major reason we rarely stop to monitor our hearts is that it was never encouraged. As children, we were taught instead to monitor our behavior. We were taught to behave. If we behaved properly, good things happened, regardless of what was going on in our hearts. My parents believed in spanking, so I modified my behavior to avoid pain, and I've been doing that ever since.
Does that make sense? So beating or spanking or negative reinforcement, it could change the behavior, but that doesn't mean that it's going to change people's hearts. And that's why we can never get rid of like sin. Like you can't eradicate sin. Right? Because like you can't change people's like motivation. You can't change people's like hearts at the end. I can teach them, like I could beat them hard enough to say like you're going to act in a good way, but inside there might be like a resistance and evil brewing up inside here. Okay? Continue on.
But it's not just the avoidance of pain that drives us. Good behavior can be rewarding. As a professional pastor, I'm paid to be good. So I've learned to modify my words and behavior so as not to damage my reputation and my career. You've no doubt done the same thing. Whatever your job, there are some things you just won't do. Not because you don't want to, but because of the professional ramifications. I'll bet there are some people you pretend to like because it's beneficial to you. And all of that is fine and necessary.
Okay. So all that is to all say, okay, because we're so, we get rewarded or there's negative consequences based on the outside stuff, we never have to really look at the heart of the matter. We're not encouraged to. Okay, as long as you are acting well on the outside, then that's it. Continuing on.
Well, this pretending can be problematic because pretending allows you to ignore the true condition of your heart. As long as you say the right things and do the right things, you're tempted to believe that all is well. It's what your childhood experience taught you, but there is a problem.
Okay, let's see what the problem is.
Eventually, your heart, the real you, will outpace your attempts to monitor and modify everything you say and do. The unresolved issues stirring around undetected in your heart will eventually work their way to the surface. Specifically, they'll seep into your actions, your character, and your relationships. If your heart continues to go unmonitored, whatever thing is growing in there will worsen to the point that you're no longer able to contain it. With careful, managed words and behaviors. So how is your heart?
Does that make sense? So whatever is going on in your heart, it's going to always ooze out. It's always going to come out. All right? So that's why I told you guys before, in marriage, like that comes out quick. Okay? Because like when you're dating, you don't get that. You could hide a lot of stuff when you're dating. When you have to live with somebody, it's going to come out. Okay? And so condition of our heart, even if you don't monitor it, it's a problem because everything that we do, our character, sooner or later, you can't fake it for that long because sooner or later, it's going to come out somewhere. Okay? And when it comes out, you guys know already, it gets pretty ugly. Okay? Truman, can you finish this one?
Maybe you already noticed things starting to slip a bit. Maybe you've always been able to contain your anger. But lately, there's an edge in your voice that scares even you.
Okay. So what do you guys think so far? I want you guys to get together with the people next to you guys. Just do you agree, okay, that we're not conditioned to monitor our heart, number one. And point number two is because we don't monitor our heart, like there's going to be crap that's going to come out. Maybe it has come out for some of you guys already, but sooner or later, it's going to come out. Do you agree with all that so far? Go for it. Oh, this, these three. Ask them for a summary of what we just went over.
What did you talk about? About the heart? Wait, Tracy, did you dye your hair again? Really? It looks good. Is it? You went to King's Park?
Kind of funny because
Oh, did you go today?
But it's like you gotta have one or two coworkers and you
Yeah,
gotta
it's a
do
hard
that.
My mom loves it, so we used to go there like almost every weekend. Oh wow. Yeah, my mom works.
Second part was, if you don't, the problem is that because we never monitor our heart, we never fix the problem, so therefore always comes out. It always leaks. All right, 30 more seconds. Okay. Anybody want to summarize it for Sarah, what we just talked about? Or did you get a good summary?
Yeah.
Okay, you got a good summary. All right then, let's keep going. Who's next?
Sarah.
Oh no, she's eating. So Luis.
It's okay, I can read and then eat. You want to read?
I'll read it.
Okay.
It says cardiologists use a procedure called arteriogram to diagnose the health of a patient's heart. An arteriogram is an X-ray of the arteries taken after a dye is injected into the bloodstream.
So cool.
The dye allows doctors to pinpoint blockage in arteries that serve as conduits carrying blood from the heart. But apart from an arteriogram, a life-threatening heart problem can go undetected for years. An individual who has blockage will experience symptoms, but these symptoms may not seem to be directly associated with the heart. Example: back pain, anxiety, loss of appetite, vision change, nausea, and insomnia.
Oh, okay.
Sounds like a commercial right
Yeah,
there.
Okay.
Take this pill when you're sad.
Angiogram? Angiogram?
Okay. It's hard to pass it up. I'm gonna die.
All right. So again, we see the symptoms of a heart blockage, but these are very, very separate things. Okay, let's continue on.
All of these symptoms that can be and often are treated as isolated issues unrelated to the health of the heart. And the right medication can take the edge off most of these symptoms. The problem, of course, is that treating the symptoms masks the real culprit. Worse, it delays treatment of the problem, thus leaving the problem to worsen.
Yeah, and so you guys can see how that could be problematic if you're not dealing with the core issue. Okay, next.
Likewise, we're tempted to treat the ancillary symptomatic challenges that stem from an unhealthy heart while ignoring the deeper issues. But as is the case with the physical heart, eventually the root problem will become a real problem. And just as a heart attack has the potential to destroy your body, so spiritual spiritual heart disease has the potential to destroy you and squeeze the life out of your most valuable relationships.
Okay, so you guys get how they're related, yeah? Okay, so again, we want to make sure that we learn how to monitor our heart. Okay, we want to be able to, what is guilt? What is anger? Okay, what is greed? And what was the last one? What is jealousy? Okay, how do we identify these four? Okay, and how do we actually find issues, resolutions as these as well? Next. My turn. So, during this series, we're going to do some poking around. I'm going to do my best to expose your heart to the penetrating light of God's truth. Once the problem area has been identified, the solutions are usually obvious. Actually, the solutions are quite simple. Okay, we're going to see that.
The annoying pear tree. Imagine for a moment that you purchased a home with a large pear tree in the yard that yields an abundance of pears each year. So abundant, in fact, that your yard becomes a sea of pears. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem, except for the fact that every time you walk through your backyard, you come into the house with mashed pears stuck to the bottom of your shoes. If that wasn't bad enough, rotting pears in the summer sun smell awful, attract bugs, and kill the grass.
Ew.
So what do? You could always grab a bucket and pick up all the pears. That would solve your problem for a couple of weeks, perhaps for a season. But come next spring, you'll be right back where you started. Chances are you would want to take a more permanent approach.
Okay.
Yet the first approach is precisely the way we tend to tackle our heart problems. We keep picking up and apologizing for our insensitive words and our inappropriate behaviors. We swear to ourselves and maybe to the people around us that we'll never act that way again. Then we repeat our mistake.
Okay, so we keep saying, "Oh, it's okay. I'll do it. I'm sorry. I won't do it again." And you keep telling yourself that, but it's the same issue. And you guys probably see a pattern with your habits as well, right? Next.
If you don't like the fruit that keeps cluttering up your backyard, the only real solution is to dig up the tree by the roots and eliminate the issue once and for all. If you deal with this source, you've dealt with the problem. So tell me this. What's the source of all the inappropriate behaviors and hurtful words that litter the ground around you? And what's the solution?
Okay. So again, we're going to keep... That's what the whole point of this series is.
Culprit is the heart. Interestingly, the Bible doesn't encourage us to try to trace our uncharacteristic behavior back to Satan. I can't blame you for trying to deflect blame. Nobody wants to admit to having heart problems. It sounds so serious. I know I feel better if I think my occasional slip-ups are purely behavioral. After all, nobody's perfect. But if you tell me my heart is faulty or in need of repair, all that hurts. Now I feel like a bad person.
Do you guys see what they're saying? It's better to say, "Oh, like Satan made me do it," or it's easy to say like, "Oh, my parents, because of the way my parents raised me," right? Or it's easy to say, "Well, if they didn't treat me like that, I only reacted because that person said something like that." Or that person's so slow, or that person's so insensitive. Okay, so it's easy to blame the other people and not deal with whatever is going on here. Next.
I worked with high school students, and I can remember all the times I counseled parents whose kids had gotten into some kind of trouble. Inevitably, parents would say something like, "He's a good kid. He just got into a little trouble." Wrong. He's a cute kid. He's a talented kid. But he's not a good kid. Good kids do good things, kind of like pear trees produce pears.
Okay, next.
The reality was your child's heart was fragile. Every one of these kids have a heart problem, not just a behavior problem. And the parents who recognized the root problem and responded accordingly were always rewarded with improvement in their child's behavior. But the parents who wouldn't allow themselves to face the painful truth found themselves dealing with the same kinds of issues over and over.
Okay, next.
But there's a solution. We need to change from the inside out. It won't do us any good to guard our behavior more closely. Our words and deeds are simply a gauge of what's going on inside. They indicate where we are, where we aren't, and where we're headed. But the real culprit is the heart. That's where the real transformation must take place.
Okay. So again, the outside, the behaviors, it gives us a clue into what's going on into our hearts. But you can't just change this and expect our hearts to change. Okay. What we need to work on is a heart. All right, next.
Trust a process. If you're kind of like me, the notion of God still needing to do some work in your heart may cause a bit of inner tension. Perhaps you've decided to follow Jesus, and like me, you may have assumed that once Jesus was in, everything was going to be great, right? But somewhere along the way, each of us is forced to face the painful truth that all is not well. So we tried different things and prayed harder, and yet we continue to see disturbing signs that our hearts aren't entirely new. What's up with that?
Yeah, maybe you guys thought, oh, after I get baptized, I'll be okay. Or, oh, maybe after I finish college, I'll be okay. Or maybe I get a job and start working, my spiritual life, or this, my heart condition, or this will be okay. Or after I start dating, things will be okay. But what do you see? The pattern is you see the same things over and over and over again. And so it's like, hey, what's going on? I thought Jesus, God, spirituality, this, but I thought it was supposed to do something. So what's going on?
What's up is this: what God begins at the moment of our salvation is not completed in that same moment. I bet you already knew about yourself, didn't you? At the risk of oversimplifying, let me put it this way. Jesus may have moved into your heart, but he may not have been given full access. That's why, as happy as you are about being forgiven, you're not always willing to extend forgiveness to others. That's a hard thing. As excited as you are about the success you're experiencing, you aren't always excited about the success someone else is enjoying. That's a hard thing too. Both are evidence that God has not completed in you what he has begun. You're still a work in progress. There's still some hard work to be done.
Okay. So again, this obviously doesn't resonate with if you are not a Christian. But if you're a Christian, you feel like I've been trying to work on my heart, but I still have issues. Okay, what he's saying is basically you haven't opened all your doors. You still got some doors that you're not willing to work with God in. Okay, and that's why there's still issues. All right, next thing. One more thing. Your heart didn't arrive at its present condition overnight. And it won't become healthy overnight either. You can't overcome an instant effect of years of blockage caused by guilt, anger, greed, and jealousy. Adopting new habits of the heart is a process, but it's a process that will yield some immediate results. Okay, so we're gonna see there's a lot of stuff that some of us, again, we haven't touched that door in a long, long time. Okay, but hopefully, we're going to do it together. So we're going to do it very softly as well. And so hopefully some of you guys are able to do it. But it's going to take some time as well to clean out a very, very old room. Let's go into discussion one more time. And then we'll go into our last section. Do you agree with what he said? Okay, right here, this part. Okay, is that maybe there's problems in our lives because we're not willing to let Jesus in. And if that's the case for you, then what are some of the things that you feel like you're not letting Jesus in with? Okay, so talk about it with your groups. Go for it. I will. Mother's house is falling from a child of God, the sun.
If I was really happy with who I am and what I know, just literally one example. Because all the problems that stop talking about, it's not being able to forgive or being jealous or not being happy and that's why there's success and everything.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a blockage somewhere.
If I'm truly happy with
It's so hard for me to
where I am with Jesus, I think others whatever is affecting me from outside won't matter to me as much. But
why do I have to trace?
I
It's a lot of work.
I think second part of the question was asking us what can
Especially if
we
you're
do.
unbalanced.
I think it was
You
asking
just
second part of the
pray
question
and
was
okay,
like
it's
asking
not.
what can we do, what can we work on to
I feel like we need some practice.
Yeah.
This is what you should do.
I think that's what they mean by like the full access.
I mean, you're the pastor.
You're willing to do most, but that
Unless
tiny
you have
little
the
bit.
idea.
I
I don't
have to
know.
focus on my relationship with Jesus more. Like actually be sensitive
I
with Jesus.
definitely never think like
That's not
In my relationship with him.
that once you can like do
That's
that
so
so
much
much that
Oh, yeah.
what
You
other
guys do
things
this?
are like what other things out there are affecting me. To be more connected. To have a relationship with him.
The past year.
I have like
It's like all the problems that ooze out of your heart. It's always
that's why
on
I
your
don't
mind.
it's hard to
They're saying that Jesus is as a Christian. Even as Christians we have
I don't know.
How can you let it go when other things people do or don't do, and it just experiencing so much about everybody is going to be faulty, everybody is going to wrong, I'm going to do something wrong, so it's like, I'd rather have the area of it, like, if you're going to screw up, then I'm just going to go ahead and forgive you for the time anyways.
now always want to
I get that slower in this expectation, it's not really being let down to kind of like, kind of helping some kind of like,
Should
change your mind and forgive you for it.
condition.
Even if it does happen, usually I'm kind of like, no big deal.
Okay, that makes sense. But for me, it's like if the person continues to do
You do live with her, so
that's when I feel like
Yeah, no, I had a coworker that would do that. And he developed as a habit, and so that's why I was like, dude, it's just gonna be a habit for you. Like, so point in time, like, all expectations just out the window, and you know you're gonna be like this all the time.
I'll be honest with you, like, it's hard for me to like sometimes know like what's my
Resolving
issue.
that beginning of that pear tree.
So that point in time, it feels just like an automatic thing, like, you're gonna screw up. I know, whatever.
Of that stress. Not just being spiritual and learning Jesus.
But I'm still nice, man. Like, you're not, what preventing you is you're not here. I guess not.
Why am I being excited?
Make her talk. She's like, oh,
And so little access to what people do in monitor.
Never to break the seal and break the
I'm not like someone who gets angry I know that it's different. I don't express it, but I know that's I cannot like I get angry but I just don't express it. I get mad at people but I just don't say anything. That's true. Yeah, but like just because I don't express it doesn't mean that I'm angry at all. Like I just let it go, let it be, let it go, and just like Sinner said earlier, just like
So you're
like look at
speculating, you're thinking like,
and
maybe.
jealousy too. There's sometimes I get jealous of what I've done people had. Like I just redirect my thoughts and be like, well, but I have this and that, but I'm okay with this. Things like that. But I
I'm
do
pretty sure
think
they have
there's
problems.
it's really hard to be like free from
But
all
we
that
don't know.
feelings and emotions.
You don't know if people who have peace
I
in
think
their
I feel
lives,
the same way. I'm not
how-
really like
if they
I won't
truly
get mad, I won't get jealous, but I'm like I
No
know
hard
that's
problems.
yeah.
I would assume so. Everyone else.
And there can be improvements for sure. Because I want to, and I feel to get that transition.
You feel like you need
And I
relief.
feel like I'm in need of that. I need
Kind of
transition.
resolve,
But
unresolved.
a lot of times we're comfortable the way
Or do
we
you feel
are.
like
It's not
something
used to
things
be
down?
like all of this. So
Or to the
well, maybe this will teach
I'm
me
talking
more
about
of
is one of the first things you
or my flaws and
to a
problems
higher
that I
power.
need
Right? That's what they say,
but
right?
but I know what you mean though, because I do want
Whether
it.
it's a
You
chair
know, I
or
do want that more connection, so I could really be.
or me or you or I mean it says look to a higher power.
You know, Dr. Song
Do
always
you agree
talks
with that?
about
I feel that's what kind of
They take advantage.
first and
Because
of God and the word is to be happy with you. Okay? You just have to.
I mean for us in this case it's Jesus.
I don't know if that actually true.
Do I agree with it? That's what I think. To enter God, I don't
Okay, 30 more seconds.
We did lighter, yeah.
It's hard to change who I am, man.
Thank you.
Donation.
She
chewed on it for like 10 minutes.
너무 거지같이 앉아있었나?
I kind of like, I'm out of free will, I'm not like, letting him fully in. But I know he's real.
How to prevent from breaking the law. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to say darn. Darn sounded too much like damn. At least, damn it. At least that was the reason I was given. I couldn't say gosh or gee for pretty much the same reason. Gosh sounded like God, and G sounded like Jesus.
Oh, G sounds like Jesus. I never realized that.
Jeez. And the punishment? Well, that didn't make much sense either. My folks told me that an infraction would result in my mouth being washed out by soap. Any of your parents did that to you guys? No? Okay.
Wait, why?
I know, it's like just Asian, you just get hit. You get beat. I couldn't picture it, but I didn't want to experience it, so I promised not to say any of those words.
My parents were the first to establish a secondary rule to keep someone from breaking a primary rule. Thousands of years ago, certain religious leaders were making a career out of it. By the time Jesus arrived on the scene, more than 500 rules had been added to the laws handed down to Moses by God himself. It was called the tradition of elders. Its sole purpose was to prevent the Jewish populace from accidentally breaking one of the original commandments. However, over time, the religious leaders had assigned to these traditions a status equal to the law of Moses.
Does that make sense? Okay, so that's why it's called what's the primary rule then in the Old Testament? 10 Commandments, right? So the religious leaders, they made a secondary rule to prevent you from even getting to the first. Okay, does that make sense?
Like gosh and darn.
Yeah, like don't even say gosh. Okay, so you don't even say God. Okay, so it's like another layer. But by the time Jesus came, those primary laws actually became primary laws.
The secondary became.
Yeah, secondary became primary as well. So now it's not 10 commandments, but it's 500,000 commandments. Okay, and that was a lot of the rules that Jesus was breaking. Okay, continuing on.
To the continual, what is it?
Chagrin.
Chagrin of the Pharisees and the what?
Sadducees.
Sadducees? What is that?
Just religious sects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus paid very little attention to their traditions while he and his disciples observed the Mosaic Code. Jesus seemed to go out of his way to violate the man-made laws of the Jewish hierarchy. The religious authorities would often point to these infractions as evidence of his blatant disregard for the law, thereby refuting his claim to be a spokesman for God.
Okay, so basically Jesus didn't care about the secondary laws because those are all man-made. Okay? He never broke the 10 commandments, obviously, but he continued to break the other commandments because they didn't make sense. Okay? And a lot of times they were making that into the main thing. Okay? That's what's basically saying, if you didn't understand. Next.
What God is concerned with. Matthew records one such incident. He decided not to wash his hands before he ate that. And his disciples followed suit. This was troublesome to the Pharisees, According to the tradition, everybody was supposed to wash from the tips of their fingers all the way down to the elbows before, before partaking of food. Washing your hands before a meal wasn't required by the law of Moses. Sure, it's a good idea, but the rabbis had made it a standard for righteousness. Jesus ignored this rule.
Right. So again, obviously, washing hands we know is a very good thing to do, and obviously Jesus is not saying don't wash your hand. But what they started to do was like, Danny, you didn't get right here. You only got right here. So I'm better than you. You know, again, this became like this standard of I'm better than you. Oh, so let me do it up to here. I'm sure it started here, and then it started going, and then it ended up there, you know? All right, let's continue on. I know. Take a full shower.
The Pharisees confronted Jesus, so this is how Jesus responded. Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. His point, Jesus isn't nearly as concerned about what goes in our mouths as he is about what comes out of our mouths, out of our hearts.
Yeah. Okay, so again, going back to how is your heart? Okay, we're trying to get to the condition of our heart. Next.
The heart, everything that comes out of the mouth comes from the heart. Everything? Did he really mean that? First glance, I'm inclined to disagree. Surely not everything that comes out of my mouth originates in my heart. If you're like me, there have been plenty of times when you said stuff you didn't really mean. Again, we've all covered our mouths in water. I don't know where that came from. But apparently Jesus will respond, I do. It came from within, it came from your heart.
Okay, let's continue on.
How do we monitor our heart? Oh, no, you go.
Sorry, you got excited, huh?
Sorry.
Jesus goes on to say that the heart is responsible not only for our words, but for our deeds as well. For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, death, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands do not defile them.
Evil thoughts, that these originated in my mind, but if Jesus is right, my mind isn't the source of all my thoughts. It goes deeper than that. My evil thoughts originate in my heart. Take a look at the other items on his list. They are all actions, deeds, and behaviors. They all come from the heart.
Okay, continuing on.
Somehow what's in our hearts, good or bad, is eventually translated into words and deeds. That's a bit scary, especially since it's so hard to know what's going on in there. For example, when we hear or see something and suddenly we're overwhelmed with emotion, we think, that really touched my heart. But we're always surprised when it happens, aren't we? Why? Perhaps because we are so out of touch with our hearts.
Okay, so again, to summarize everything, okay, even the words that come in our mouth, okay, everything comes from the heart. Basically, that's what Jesus is saying. So everything that we do, it's always operated based on our heart. Okay, that's number one. Second thing he's saying is like when like some sensory overload happens and then like you feel really warm and you feel like, you know, like, what is that? What do they call it? Goosebumps kind of thing all over. Then again, it's this idea that like we feel our heart. We feel like something is moving within our heart. And so again, he's using that to say, oh, again, it's because we're not monitoring our hearts enough. Continuing on.
On the flip side, we've all seen and heard things that should have affected us emotionally and nothing, no response. And we wonder, what's wrong with me? Why was everyone else impacted and I just stood there? Perhaps you've even been accused of being hard-hearted or having a heart of stone. If you're a guy, you may have even taken pride in the fact that your heart's not easily moved. But is that a good thing?
Right. Okay, is that a good thing? Okay, so especially 3s and 5s here, Enneagram 3 5s. Story of our lives right here, 3 5s right here. Okay, just don't feel a lot of stuff. Okay, just don't feel a lot of emotions. Okay, but again, is that a good thing? No, it's not. Okay, not a good thing. All right, let's go next.
None of us reach adulthood without a few things in our heart. Our response to those things determines the condition of our hearts. We cannot control how people treat us. We cannot stop their hurtful words. But there's good news. As we will see, we can monitor their effects on our hearts. We can reverse the damage and keep our hearts free from further destructive debris.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we're going to be learning as well. Okay. The better you're able to monitor what's going on inside your heart, then you're you're a lot more sensitive about what's going on in your heart as well. So when people are critical to you, or when you feel angry, you feel jealous, or you feel greedy, then again, you start to feel with your heart once again. And the more you monitor it, the better you're able to heal as well. Continuing on. And this will be the last section, okay? There's 2 reasons why you must monitor your heart and reverse the damage. Number 1, heart issues always take their toll on relationships. Okay? Greed, jealousy, guilt, anger will always mess up your relationship somehow. It will always negatively affect your relationship if you don't deal with it well. Specifically, it impacts an individual's ability to initiate and maintain intimate relationships. People with wounds lodged in their hearts from something in their past don't really want to be known. Make sense, yeah? So they build walls. You can get close, but there's a limit. And that gets in the way of intimacy. Okay? So again, they can have just superficial relationships, but it's hard to go deep with them. Or it's hard to, there's certain people, certain friends you guys have, right? You've known them for a long time, but you don't really feel like you know them. Or you always feel like there's certain things, you try to go a little bit deeper, but it's just it doesn't go in. Next, number 2.
The old saying is true, hurt people hurt people. So if you're a human being and you're planning on having meaningful relationships, which we all need, you must monitor your heart and learn to clean out the damage.
Okay, last one.
Whatever your situation, odds are you've got some cleaning out to do. We all do. And if you're willing to take what may be a painful look in the mirror, you may find the motivation you need to change. And this series will provide you the tools you need to effect change.
All right, so next week, we're going to start with guilt. All right. All right, go for it.